Good morning, everybody. Um, Today is the 9th of January, 2022. Yesterday, this is Barbara. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about our ego and ourself, and the fact that the ego is there to serve us. It has its role, it has its purpose, but the ego is not there to control us. We talked about the fact that the ego helps us do those things that are automatic, that we don't have to think about doing, which is a good thing. It's a good thing we don't have to think about breathing. It's a good thing that we don't have to uh, uh, think of every minute that we are driving, because if we did not depend on the ego, uh, and our mind got distracted, we'd be in trouble. But at the same time, as the ego has its role and its function, it should not be what controls us. So we talked a little bit about that yesterday. And in a minute, I'll see if there are any questions or comments, or if anyone has had a chance to think a little bit more about what we talked about and want to make a comment, please feel free to do so. We talked about our thoughts and our feelings and our speech and our action having specific vibrations because they come from different aspects of our being, and they reverberate differently in terms of the universe itself, even. Because remember, the universe is us and we are the universe. And so we have to be consistent in those vibrations and what we're sending out to the universe in order for the universe to reflect back that to us. And if we are inconsistent in what we say and what we feel, perhaps, or what we think and what we say, if there's an inconsistency in those things, mixed messages are sent to the universe, and it knows who we are, and it makes it and it's designed to reflect back to us what we give it. But when we send mixed messages, that's confusing, and we may not get back what we think we should have gotten back, because we were not clear. We talked about the fact that the Most High created with the Hebrew letters initially, and each of those letters has its own vibration, its own resonance, its own tone, and that the way that we create is through the words that we speak. But again, understand that although we say we create through the words we speak, our thoughts and our actions also vibrate and have a resonance. We talked about I think we talked a little bit about the types of people there are, and we put it in the way of being a mineral or a vegetable or an animal or a human. And we talked about aspects of those kinds of people, and we've all been there, and we all sometimes float back between them. The issue is, do we understand that we are there and the fact that we don't stay there? For instance, we've all talked about vegging out. It's been a difficult week. It's been a long week. And all I want to do is veg out. All I want to do is, eat popcorn and look at movies, or eat whatever and look at ball games all week, whatever. But that's an example of a type of vegging out. And I'm not saying that it's bad to do that. I'm saying that should not be the all-consuming part of who we are and what we are. We talked about the analogy of the ego is like training wheels. I think Sheldon gave us that analogy, and that was I really like that, because training wheels on a bicycle allow you to learn to do what it is you have to do, which is master riding a bicycle. But there are also other things that training wheel will do to us if we consistently depend on it, even after the time that we should have mastered riding the bicycle, for instance. I'm sorry, I'm a little congested this morning, so if anybody has trouble hearing or understanding me, just ask a question. I'll be glad to repeat. So in terms of the training wheel, usually if you have, say, a road that, yes, go ahead.
It's Ron.
Yes,
I'm sorry. I hate to
go ahead,
interrupt
Ron.
you. We had
No.
trouble. We had some trouble with some of the people getting in this morning, and
Yeah.
Sheldon was working when I heard you speaking. Are we recording? Is everyone on, and are we recording?
Yes,
Yeah, we were
everyone.
recording.
Yes, everyone's on, and we are recording.
Please forgive me. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure we're all in. Thank you. I apologize.
Not
No,
a
don't
problem at all.
apologize. Thank you for your concern about others. Anyway, training wheel, smooth road, because the wheels go back and forth. Remember, they teeter and totter while you're learning to ride it until you learn to balance. Well, when you learn to balance, you don't need the wheels anymore. The wheels are sort of can hinder you once you learn to balance. The other thing about training wheels is that you can't go over certain types of terrain, rough terrain, rocks, things like that, whereas you can on a bicycle. So I thought that was a beautiful analogy of the ego itself, and the fact that it serves its purpose. It has its role. But at some point in time, guys, we gotta get control of the ego. We gotta understand that we are more than the ego. The ego functions out of the animalistic type of man, in that it functions to take care of us. It functions to take care of the self, but the self is who we really are. But the ego functions to support the self. Now, probably most of my life, the ego has done more than supported myself. Probably most of my life, the ego has exhibited some extent of control, particularly when I allowed it to do what it will. I allowed myself to continue through life on automatic on a lot of different fronts, whether it's the work front, whether it was the personal front, whether it was the being part of a family front. I allowed the ego to function on automatic. And so my response was an automatic kind of thing. But it's only when the self is allowed to begin to blossom and become the entity that it's created to be, i.e., the divinity that's within it, does the self begin to grow and be what it's purposed to be, the essence of the Creator in the earth, the Elohim having a human experience. So let me stop there and see if anybody else remembers anything else I said or have any comments or questions.
Well, going back to the notion of the training wheels, and I do understand from many people's perspective. We're talking about being on cruise control yesterday, and what I thought about just now as you were talking was the idea of a ship, and recall hearing this, and it relates to us this, I don't want to say it was the same, but the notion that a ship is most safe in the harbor, where it doesn't have to really deal too much with wind and things like that. And in the harbor, it has, all types of support and things like that. However, the ship was never made to sit in the harbor. Yet in the same way, in terms of having training wheels in the beginning, alpha, et cetera, and as it relates to the ego, we as individuals or as Elohim are rather having this human physical experience. We're not meant to go on cruise control throughout our lives. We were to actively and consciously participate in creation and to understand and learn, like I said, about doing that consciously. I'm done.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Just for reference, go ahead.
This is Audrey. Good morning. I just
Morning.
wanted to comment on what Sheldon just said. It's interesting he would mention a ship in a harbor because although the ship is safe in the harbor, can't always stay in the harbor, because what if a hurricane comes? Then you're most vulnerable in the harbor. You got to be out to sea. So you can't always rely on that safe place, that place you think is safe. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. You just described what we talked about yesterday. The shaving commercial on TV and something related to it. And then the fellow slaps himself and says, thanks, I needed that. Or we talked about the wake-up call. We talked about that thing in our lives, that crisis, that hurricane, if you will, that in our lives that occurs. And it doesn't just occur once necessarily, although it can occur once to get us started on the path to knowing self and to get us started. Remember, that's what I said, because a lot of times what we'll do is the ego resists our doing anything new. The ego resists our learning anything new. And so when something happens and it captures our attention, for me, myself, and for me, it captures my attention, and I say, there's more than just this. I'm more than just this. I gotta understand that I've got to learn to interface with people. I can't have it my way all the time. Life is not about me. Those kinds of things hit us in the face and capture our attention. It is then that we are ready for that journey of introspection. Just for reference, I wanted to just go ahead. Well, let me just acknowledge some of where I'm getting information that begins to open up for us what we're talking about today. I read something years ago, Personal Kabbalah by Penny Cohen, and then Living Kabbalah by Maggie Whitehouse, and some of the concepts that they describe are what are the concepts that are hitting me in terms of speaking to me as we talk today. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about what you were just saying, supporting what Sheldon said. The thing to me is you look at this and you see that your ego was your first protector, and it was also your first best friend, and that's why it's hard to release it. For example, when you're a toddler and you throw that tantrum and it works, you become closer to that part of you that you remember that. You remember those things that you don't want to do and you get away with it. Or so all of this stays in your head, and we move to a place where we allow that ego, that part of us, to take command under certain conditions. So when you reach a point of maturity, it's hard to get the ego to relinquish that control, because that's the relationship that has always worked in the past. So that's a thought I had when you guys were talking about that, and you may have said some of that all yesterday. Yeah.
Thank you, Ron. That's part of what we've been discussing. The ego is doing what it's supposed to do for us at the time we need it to do what it's supposed to do. It's protecting us. It's being, you're right, it's being a friend. One of the things that that I came across was that the fact that the ego is fully formed around the age of 7. The Jesuits had a phrase they said. They said, "Give me a boy until he is 7, and I have him for life." In other words, the imprints, the beliefs, the thoughts are inculcated in that child for life. But herein is the truth. The truth is what I needed as a child to guide and protect me and to befriend me is not what I need to become Elohim, having a human experience. And therein, as you say, it's so difficult. As I said, the ego wants to do things that it's comfortable doing, that it's used to doing, that it has mastered, and it doesn't like new things. And so I said sometimes things can happen to get our attention, and they get us thinking beyond the ego. And we begin to do that new thing. I'll take this different path. Or, oh, that road that I always take, it's got a detour sign. So, I wouldn't detour unless I had to. So I guess I have to detour. And I learn, I go another route. Well, I have to pay more attention on that route because I don't know that route. And my ego it can't keep me functioning on automatic because I have to know and see where I'm going. Well, the issue is after you do something new, you can revert back to your old mindset, if you will, of allowing the ego to take control. And that's why I said that there may be a number of things in our lives that are there to get our attention. If everyone attended to and paid attention to what we needed to do to begin that process of growing the self, the first time a crisis happened, then we would all be further developed in terms of who we are as Elohim. But obviously, even for me, I know it took a number of those attention-getting moments. But that's what we need to do, allow those moments to propel us, not to get us out of that rut of the ego and the automaticity, but to propel us outside of that and to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one, so that then we get to the point where we're functioning based on our controlling, the self-controlling the ego, rather than vice versa. Does that resonate? That's not rhetorical. It's just a question.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me see if there are any questions about what we're talking about in terms of ego. We're not saying it's a bad thing. We needed it. I mean, it has its purpose. Questions, comments?
This is Vermel.
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Barbara, if I understand this correctly, this is what I got from it. Then whenever we're in situations of discomfort or uncomfort or not familiar, instead of feeling out of sorts, we should pause and breathe and see it. Think of it more as an experience to help us grow.
yeah, the issue is, okay, wow, I really didn't like that. That did not make me feel good. But what is the message in that for me? What does every single experience in our lives, perceptually, we define it in a certain way. Now, perceptions are not always accurate, but they are our perceptions. And just because we perceive something, and a perception relates to thinking and thought, just because we perceive something a certain way doesn't make that truth. And so the question is, what really is the lesson? What am I to get out of this? What am I to learn from this experience? Every single experience, be it the perception of something that's bad for us, and remember I said bad, perception of badness, right? Because the really true question is anything bad or good in and of itself, other than how we choose to define that as bad or good?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Barbara?
And there, yes. Jump in.
No, go ahead. I yield. Go ahead.
Who else was there?
Well, I was about to say something in regards to us not trying, but making sure to not necessarily look at, we mentioned it earlier today as well as yesterday. We don't want to get the idea that the ego is just terrible. It is something that definitely helps, but at a certain extent, if you rely only on it, it can be detrimental in a way. So it's thinking about birds, and what some birds do when they have little baby birds is the birds become acclimated with being able to walk on their feet, but they haven't yet flown. And as we think about the ego is the part, and I can't remember if Ron or Barbara mentioned that it becomes fully intact or understood more so in place at around the age 7. So what that means is that is the part of ourselves that we know or think we know and that we understand and we feel comfortable with. And that's how and what we see ourselves as. Going back to the birds, when the birds are first born, they learn how to walk. That is what they feel comfortable with. That is their safe place. That is their comfort. That is a part of them, of course, and who they are. Yet there is something that is more to them that they don't quite understand or know about, which is why they're more so afraid of it or will not. I was about to say walk into it, fly into it. And the reason why I say fly into it is because what the mother does is just pushes them out of the nest and makes them literally have to fly on their own. Now they're out of their comfort zone. Now they are beyond what it is that they thought they were at the, initially when they were acclimated and understood about their abilities to walk. And that is in the same way how our egos are a portion or a part of who we are, but it's not the absolute all. And when we only cling to what it is that we understand, in a sense, we limit knowing and understanding who we are. And we are only limited to the part of ourselves that we already know. And so therefore, there is no expansion or greater understanding. I don't want to say potential, but we don't start further experiencing living out more of ourselves, for lack of better words.
Thank
I'm
you,
done.
Shelley. Thank you, Shelley. George, you're going to say something as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, as we were speaking, on the story of Moses, having the burning bush experience and looking at, his ego in terms of the lack of self-confidence as far as leading the Israelites out of Egypt, but in terms of him, bottom line, doing what he knows that God was saying, that I will be with you. But I just wanted to maybe get some clarification in terms of the bottom line for him dealing with that emotional or dealing with that ego of self-confidence, but more knowing that, he's covered and just to go out and represent, the I am. Does that have, any relevance in terms of the ego for him?
Yes, sir. Moses speaks to us as well. We are Moses as well. Every single time we have something that says, "Wake up!" We are asleep. Wake up! That's what it's saying to us.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention. Live. Move. Take this off of cruise control. There's so much more for you to do, to explore, to experience. Go ahead. Who's trying to get in? Nick, was that you? Was someone trying to say something?
No, that wasn't me.
Oh, okay. Anybody else? Because what the issue here is, ego keeps you trapped, and I think Sheldon put it beautifully when he says it has its purpose. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's not bad, but it keeps you enclosed and bound by certain kinds of limiting reactions. Remember we talked about reacting yesterday? When a thought comes into our mind and then there's an action. Well, when we react, it's doing the same thing over again. If we have an experience, which is the same or similar, we have the same reaction. And sometimes we wonder, why don't things change for us? Because we are reacting the same way. For lack of a better term, growing the self means, getting beyond the ego means, is I begin to respond. Respond opens things up, and it gives me options. And respond says that I have to begin to take responsibility for the actions that I take, rather than allow the ego to function on automatic and to keep just going and doing and having the same, reacting the same way over and over again. And so to become the Elohim, having a human experience, I need to then do as the one who created me. I need to begin to take responsibility for my actions, whether it's in speech, whether it's in thought, feelings, speech, and actions. Now, therein, I think, is a big difference between functioning automatic and just letting things happen to you and around you, and being able to, and then being able to respond in a, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I finally turned it off. And being able to respond from yourself, your true self, rather than from the perspective of how the ego would deal with the thing. The only way we learn, the only way we can grow is, and the only way that we show that we are created in that image of the divine, is to begin by assuming and by taking responsibility for our thoughts, for our feelings, for our speech, for our actions. And that's a big deal. And what you were talking about, George, was Moses and his seeming and his saying, but I don't have the speech, but, you remember the words but we talked about yesterday. I want to do this, but I'm not a good speaker. I want to say this, but is very limiting. But is still attached to that ego. But is the thing that is resistive, that wants to keep us from acting. Okay, Lord, I hear what you're saying, and I want to know that you're with me. That's a whole different way to look at that. That's a whole different way to think about that and to perceive that. I want to do this, and I want to know that you're with me. Does that resonate? I'm sorry, I'm
Yes,
getting
it
a
does.
busy signal. Is that my
Yes.
busy signal? Ah! So sorry. That's the ego trying to, no, that's all right. Go ahead.
Barbara.
Well, okay, got you. But let me just make sure. George, does that speak to what you were talking about?
No, absolutely, and I really appreciate that because I think there's those of us, so I know myself, where sometimes we get stuck, but we need to, move with action and know that, I am represents, you know what I mean, and we can go ahead and do that which we need to do.
Thank you, George.
I understand.
Okay. Thank you, George. Okay, who's next? Is that S or
Yeah.
someone else?
Yes, it's ST. I was going to say
Hey,
this,
S.
and putting it in other terms to how we see it today. We try to overlook or not own up to mistakes or look at failure as something that we got to correct instead of learning from it and being able to move forward. I think everybody was talking more so along of development. How do you develop into someone that you have the potential, but how do you nourish that development? And I was just having this conversation in the terms of just basketball in general. Everybody's professional. What separates the person from becoming an all-star versus just being a professional? And the people that are content with just making it there, that's their ego stunting their growth. The ego got them there, but it also limits your growth. The guy that wants to be the all-star continues to develop, and they do things that would be beneath a certain player as far as putting in different training, working on a weakness, developing from the weakness instead of just always trying to cover the weakness up. So the person that kind of develops from the mistakes and not necessarily like sweeps it under the rug because our ego tells us to, hey, be perfect. You developed from that and you grow from that, where if you're always trying to cover it based on the ego, it's stunting your growth. So that's just how I kind of interpret it there.
Thank you, S. That's an excellent point. That's the way we need to see weaknesses and mistakes, as opportunities, not to cover it beneath the mask of the ego, so that we can continue to have a certain persona, a certain face, a certain facade that we show people to make them think that we are in control. That's not how you grow. So thank you for that example. It is understanding that it is all of those things in our lives, the perceived weaknesses and all of those things are given to us by the universe, by our Creator, to enhance our growth and development as Elohim. Now that may not resonate with some people who are just beginning this journey of back to I don't quite know how to say it, back to understanding and being aware of who we really are, even when we thought we were somebody else. So what we got to do is not let those things like pride and vanity and all those other things that the ego will put up as barriers block us from continuing to experience and explore the self that we are, and understanding that in that exploration and that experience, it keeps unfolding us, and we keep unfolding to ourselves who we are. And so it's expansive. It's not. It doesn't constrict or bind us. It's like thoughts can be, for lack of a better, enslaved at a certain point within the ego. In other words, the same thoughts come up, blah blah blah. The understanding the self and exploring and opening up to the self is like being set free, in a sense. That wow, that could have taken me out, but it didn't. That what happened there could have taken me out, but it didn't. I am here, and I am still growing and still exploring.
Hey, Barbara Swan.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, more. I mean, I was listening to what S said, and your follow up on it. The word that came to me was submission. Along the lines, when you come face to face with self, there has to be some form of submission. And listening to how S put it, the ego may get the basketball player to a certain point, but when he meets someone who's better than he is, that says, whether it's a teammate or not. Like I was listening the other day, they were talking about all the pros that go to Elijah Wan in off season to learn how to play with their back to the rims. They're already in the pros, but you got to submit to a process to get better or to reach that place you want to be. So you're talking about getting to self and seeing that there comes a time and a place where you have to sit down face to face and look at that mirror and see where you want to go and the benefits of it, and set that goal. And that comes with, as you just said, all those voices and all those prides and egos and have to come on the back burner. You have to submit yourself to that process, and that goes that's what takes you to the next level, or at least part of it.
Thank you, Ron. Other ideas, thoughts?
Yes, this is Angela.
Hey,
I was just
I'm
thinking
Angela.
about hey, how you doing?
Thank you.
Talking about ego, but I was thinking about the experienced ego. And why I say experienced ego is when people say, I've been doing this for 21 years and this is the way to do it. There's no other way to do it, but there may be a better way to do it, because a person go on their experiences sometimes because that's what it seems to work for them. But on the other hand, it may not work for the other people. So I was looking at is experience sometimes used as ego.
Yes, ma'am. We can allow ourselves to be disciplined by what has worked for us in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And those things that have worked for us in the past and those actions that we've taken are what are in control. The issue is, do we want to be disciplined and controlled by what has worked in the past in a world that by its very nature, because its creation is not the same as it was a minute ago, let alone 20 years ago. And that's what developing self allows us to do, to live fully in this ever expanding creation, and being able to discipline ourselves to be open to that rather than being chained or locked up by previous experiences. So you're exactly right in terms of if that's what I'm going on 20 years ago, wow, I'm still locked up because the world has changed so significantly. What people need, what people, what I need to be, I can't change the world until I change me. I can't change and influence the world to the extent that I'm able to, that I'm purposed to do, that I've been created to do, until I change the self and understand that I don't have any limitations. I no longer have limitations. The way that I did things in the past are not necessarily what needs to happen or what someone needs going forward or what I even need going forward. I've got to be able to liberate myself. And in terms of liberating myself, there are going to be times when it's a little scary because it is different. It is something I'm not used to. It's just like we talked about with the ego. The ego makes things comfortable for us. Well, life is living in the discomfort until that becomes comfortable, and then taking that level of comfort and pushing it even beyond that. So creation is ever expanding. And when we do this, when we think this way, when we speak this way, then life unfolds, it continues to unfold, and we continue to see what we're capable of, what's already in us, but we just don't know we're capable of it, if that resonates. Does that speak to what you're saying, Angela?
Yes, ma'am. Can I ask another
Okay.
question?
Of course you can.
When you was talking about yesterday living in the present, can you elaborate? Because the first thing that came to my mind yesterday when you said that it was speaking things in existence. I know it's beyond that. That's, what religion told us, speaking things. But when you say living in the present, how do you actually live in the present? I know it go beyond that because you.
Okay, let me give you a couple examples, Angela. When something occurs, we often say, I would have done this, or I could have done this. When we reflect on something that has occurred, I should have done this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Woulda, coulda, shoulda has a value associated with it that is something that has already occurred. But it says that I did not act on whatever it is I woulda, coulda, shoulda acted on at the time. However, to live in the present means to see things as they are, not just as I perceive them to be. Because again, remember, our perceptions are based on our thoughts, and our thoughts are also based on sometimes previous baggage that we have. So we have to ensure that we are not screening everything through what's imprinted on us through the experience only of childhood, or the experiences only of this particular school that I went to, or the experience only of the people with whom I surrounded myself with during my formative years. What we have to do is to open ourselves up to the now. What is happening right now? Living in the present is being open to, like Moses in the burning bush, paying attention to now. What happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future. Our now defines what the future will be. But the now is even the future is always the now. All we got is right now. How we choose to respond right now is living in the present. Teachers, I need some help with this. Anybody else?
Hey, this is Nick. I think I just want to add to that. Living in the present is sort of very much being aware of what your ego is doing at the given moment and making a choice about how to respond to what you become aware about your ego. So like if you examine your own ego and sort of just think about how you're feeling and why you feel that way, is sort of the contents of your ego, is it the result of you being unselfish? Is it the result of you being selfish in a way? Is it the result of you reacting to something someone else did or some other thing that happened to you, etc.? Like why is it that you feel the way you feel? And then if you recognize that you feel the way you feel because of a particular reason, choosing how to respond to that, to the source of your feeling, and choosing how to direct your feeling in a new direction if you realize that it's not something that you want to keep holding on to within yourself. So every moment in the present contains that opportunity to be more aware of sort of why you are the way you are. And every moment in the present contains the opportunity to direct yourself and our experience of ego and all the parts of ourself in a new direction that is hopefully more helpful to our healing and more helpful to our growth as a spiritual being. I'm done.
Thank you. Anyone else? In a sense,
it's Ron. I just want to
go ahead, Ron.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to comment on something Nick said, because I don't know if he recognized it, but he brought all of our lessons together in something he said. He talked about using that any given situation in the moment to see where you are right now. That is a form of what we've talked about, making space. So you in living in the now then is making that space for whatever you need at time that it is needed, and that is prepares you then to deal with whatever comes about, and that act of, for lack of a better term, submission or holiness or being sanctified, or however you want to look at it, it allows that energy to come to you to be put into whatever form you need to take care of any given situation. So I just his choice of words that just kind of brought that to mind, just listening to what he said. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. So really, living in the moment also is being aware of what we're thinking, critically aware of what we're thinking, not necessarily she's just trying to show off, all that kind of stuff. We have to, in a sense, we talk to ourselves when we live in the moment. Thinking is talking to yourself in a sense. So my question is, what's in your mirror? When you look at yourself, when I look at myself, what we see in the mirror? And the image is not necessarily a physical image I'm talking about. The image I'm seeing is, what are we thinking? How are we processing? What are we seeing? What do we believe? What do we really believe? Because what we believe, we conceive, and what we conceive, we create, in a sense. So living in the now says that instead of looking at myself and saying, boy, I really blew it, nobody loves me, that we got to change the way we need to talk to ourselves, self-talk. I am lovable. I am competent. I am creative. I am disciplined. And I don't mean discipline. We usually think about discipline as a negative, but remember, discipline we can only balance discipline with loving kindness. If we remember the tree of life, there's that duality. Living in the now is embracing those dualities and making them function together as one. So when I say somebody's lazy, look at them. What is that saying? That's me taking my old thoughts, and because of what I think I see and perceive, I'm putting a label on it that's not a positive label. I never get what I want. I never do what I want to do. All of those things are things that we need to talk to ourselves about and retrain, rethink, refocus what that speech is that comes out of our mouth. Because it's through the thought and the feeling and the thinking and the speech that we create. So living in the now is keeping that bird's eye view, if you will, on what I'm really thinking. And when it seems to be catawampus or when it seems to be off, balancing it, bringing it back in line. This self-development is discipline. And that discipline always wants to revert back to the 20 years ago that you talked about, Angela. It always wants to revert back to patterns and imprints and that we've already developed. But the true growth is right now, how do I define this? How do I see this? How do I focus this? And what do I speak so that this becomes something that's for my benefit or for the benefit of humankind. So there's been a lot of talk about examples of living in the now, but it may have not struck a chord with you, Angela, so keep asking questions if it hasn't.
It has. It has. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think a point I wanted to mention in what you were saying, Barbara, is, that affirmation for me is I am the thinker that create the thoughts that create the things. So what are you creating? So when you speak about I am, which is two of the most powerful words in existence, you put that what you say you are. I am operating on my higher self, not my lower self. So I think these are just all affirmations, in terms of realizing that what we think we create, and that's what, we want to put forth. That resonates.
I can't change. I can't trust people. I'm not in control of my life. All of those things are barriers there that the ego helps perpetuate to keep us from moving beyond that and getting to the I am. Remember we talked yesterday, George, thank you very much for that reminder, that we are created in the image of the Most High. And so if I say I am, anything I put behind that, I am this or I am that, needs to be aligned with the Creator. And so the Creator has no lack. The Creator has no problem with not controlling, but balances that control with loving kindness and with discipline. The Creator has no problem with trust. It is us who need to know that we trust and in what we trust and in whom we trust. So all of those things we say, we've got to change our way of speaking. We've got to, thinking and speaking in order to get a different action, in order to get a different response. That end is what helps to keep us in the present. To know that, and some of you might be thinking, boy, Barbara, that's work. Well, every new thing has to start somewhere. And it may seem to be work until you begin to do it as a part of who you are. And then there's something else that comes up that you need to then master. So it's like an ever unfolding flower, if you will. There's something always new. So we should never be bored, guys. If you're living in the now, you're not going to get bored because there's so much to attend to. Other thoughts?
Hey, Barbara, this is Charles. Go to Romans 7 and start verse 19 and 25 and see if that verse deals with this situation that we're talking about now. Romans 7, verse 19 through 25.
Go ahead and read it, Charles.
Okay. It said, for the good that I would, I do not. I do, but the evil which I would not, that I do. And it say, now if I do that I would not, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwell in me. I found when a law that when I will do good, evil is present with me. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man. But I see another law in my members, warning against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, I who shall deliver me from the body of his death. I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then with the mind I myself serve the law of God, but with the flesh the law of sin.
Wow,
so
Charles.
how does this scripture go?
Wow, Charles, that's in a nutshell talking about this this dissonance, this pull, this struggle within us to live right now and to take responsibility for ourselves, for our thoughts, for our speech, and for our action. That's an example of that. And it's what Nick is saying, having that view and knowing, you know, the way that our ego would see something, and knowing, okay, that's not what I want to do. So this is an example of the struggle, the inward battle that we deal with as we continue the growth process. It's like that caterpillar that's struggling to break free from the bounds of his tomb, for lack of a better word. What is it that the caterpillar has that it must weave itself in order to nourish itself and survive until it's ready to become that butterfly? Well, it's got to break through the barriers of that before it can be the butterfly, and simply not crawl on the ground anymore, something it's totally familiar with at the time, and being free to fly, which is the butterfly, which is what we're talking about. It's the same similar thing. When we know ourselves, the more we know about ourselves, our true self, and acknowledge what's lurking at the door and understand, yeah, that's at my door, but I choose not to allow that to control me. That's knowing it and acknowledging it and making the decision that that's not going to control the real me. That's when we begin to soar. That's like the caterpillar that becomes the butter, that breaks through the barrier and the jail of that wall, that cocoon, and begins to soar. Now, when we soar, there are going to be other things we find that can be challenges to us when we soar. But that's a battle for another day. we take each one as it comes, in the form that it comes, in the way that it comes, and deal with it then. Because if I think about tomorrow and I think about yesterday, it keeps me from dealing with what's in the mirror right now. So thank you, Charles, for that reminder. So yeah, that kind of sets it in perspective of what we're talking about.
Thank you. And Barbara, can no one help that butterfly while it's in that worm while it's in that cocoon trying to break away? He got to do it all on his own. If he not someone helping, it could die or whatever. He have to do it himself to break out of the cocoon, because that's what makes him squirm enough to fly.
Such wisdom, such wisdom. That's who we are. It's a journey that we have to do to look at ourselves, you're right, on our own, because everybody will see a different us looking from the outside in. They will look at my skin color rather than who I am. They will look at the way I wear my hair rather than who I am. They will look at my weight rather than who I am. So if I depend on someone else outside of me to define what I should do, how I should think, how I can develop to become all that I'm purposed to be, then I'm looking in the wrong place. And my mirror is totally out of whack. So you're absolutely right. When we start this journey, we said we have to do it. We have to start the inward journey on our own. And it's not a journey that anybody can show us exactly how to do it. We've got to face those things in us, because we each have all of those things in us that are just built up, those walls, those veils, from all aspects of our experiences, or all aspects of things that and places we've been, and not just necessarily physically, and not just necessarily geographically either, but mentally. We got to do it on our own. That's where the journey starts. Now, what happens is we can support each other once we've broken free from this and says, this is the path I want to take. We can be supportive of each other. But you're right, Charles, that inward look-see, I got to do it myself, because only I have the internal mirror for me. Does that resonate?
Yes, it does, sweetheart.
Thanks, sir. Any other thoughts? I thought we would be done with this yesterday, but it keeps unfolding itself, and people keep coming up and providing such beautiful examples that we can use from a physical perspective and expand the spiritual aspect of it. So thank you so much for that as well.
Maybe that is because of the times that we're in right now, where there is so much separation and division, and so many egos and so much pride going on, and people are going in so many different directions, and the confusion that's out there, that someone needs to take a breath and try to make sense of it all and be a voice of reasoning. So we may not see ourselves as that at every moment, but maybe, just maybe, that's part of what we're doing when we talk about things like this, and kind of put things in a spiritual perspective, more so than just from a worldly view. So
thank you, Ron,
maybe that's part of it. Yeah.
This path of spiritual growth, it deals with discipline. And when we're talking about the tree of life, it deals with discipline and what we're doing right now, supporting each other by reminding each other that it does take discipline for us to guard our thoughts and to guard our speech and to guard our actions, even more so now than ever before. Because again, we're not wrestling with just things that we see, but it's a wrestling with those energies, those powers that are that would tend to want to overtake us. What is that verse? We wrestle not with principalities, but powers, and well, those strong things that would overtake us. This is our supporting each other and reminding each other that regardless of all of these things coming from the external to us, whatever we see, whatever we don't see, I mean, because remember, everything is not physical. Everything has its root in the spiritual. And so we are supporting each other, reminding ourselves to be mindful of protecting and guarding our hearts and guarding our thoughts, guarding our speech, guarding the way we feel, guarding what we say, and not putting someone else in bondage by how we describe them, define them in a perceived negative way. So
that scripture was 6 and 12. Ephesians 6 and 12.
Oh, okay.
Ephesians
the principalities.
6 and 12.
Thank you.
Yes.
Read that for me right quick while you're there. Charles?
I'm going to start reading it. It says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principality, against power, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against the spiritual wickedness in high places."
Thank you, Charles.
You're welcome.
That's what we're dealing with now. And that's why we're thank you, Ron, for giving us that macro view of why we are talking about this right now, and reminding us as we unfold this journey and travel this path that we need to stay focused, and all of the other things that would be distractions, let them stay where they are, because we don't need those distractions. If they come through our mind, just let them come, go through right fast, and stay the course.
Good morning, everyone. One of the things about hey, how everybody doing? One of the things about ego is what fuels our ego or what feeds the ego. You have some people in life, they go from 0 to 100. Something fuels that. Then you have other people in parallel universe, they go from 100 to 0. Something fuels that. So with the ego, something is feeding it, something is fueling it. It's just how it's not a good thing and it's not a bad thing. It's just what it is of what you want to create with it. And that's probably about the balance that I've heard over the last 2 days. No one has said anything negative about having an ego, and no one has said anything good about having an ego. So with the ego, something is feeding it, something is fueling it. And by listening to the lesson, I always thought lazy people didn't have an ego. But to be lazy, you have to have an ego. I never thought, lazy people had an ego. because
Let me stop you there, George. George, let me stop you there with speech. Lazy people. I don't want to go into your definition of how you perceive lazy people. What we are saying is we feed our own ego by listening to it, by responding, by reacting out of the ego. We do it. And we've said that the ego serves a good purpose up to a point. And after that point, it serves a secondary purpose. After the self comes forward and begins to become aware of who it is, the ego is still necessary, but it serves a secondary point. The self controls the ego rather than the ego controlling the self. But I wanted to deal with what you just said about a lazy person, because that's just what we were talking about. Instead of defining somebody and putting a judgment on it, because to define someone as lazy puts a judgment on it, and that judgment is from your perspective. Someone else may see that person and see something totally different. So that's what we're talking about trying to guard our speech too, because who are we to label somebody? We are just simply to respond and to the facts. That guy is sitting over there drinking a soda pop. That's what I see. Rather than that guy is over there being lazy and not doing his work. You see what I'm saying? Is how we frame things. That when we're trying to develop the self, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to frame things in a way that we don't bring our judgment, our old perceptions, anything like that onto it. We've been talking about.
So what you're saying?
Go ahead.
So what you're saying, we don't label things the way outside of God. You understand what I'm saying? We don't supposed to label things outside of God. Okay, all right. And another thing, what Joel was saying.
Every single person has that spark of divinity. Every single person. And when we say something other than attributes of God or the Creator, you know, we're bearing false witness in a sense.
It's the labeling that has gotten us in the predicament we're in now. As Barbara's example a few minutes ago, someone looks at me and sees my skin color. They see this about me. They see what they want to see to divide themselves from me. So we use labels to divide people and to elevate ourselves at the same time. And if you are an instrument of truth, you see that those barriers are not real. Those are things that are, you know, we're talking about the ego. The ego is put out there, and it's easily latched on to by others because we all have egos, and it sounds right. It sounds right to call somebody lazy. It sounds right to say, okay, he's this or that because he lives on the south side, or he has this kind of job, or he's blue collar, or he makes this kind of income. So it is those things that have separated us, and not to for us to show us that we all are a part of the same Elohim. We're all part of the same Creator, and we use those terms so much so that we have even created our own versions of who God is based on the values we put on those separations, and that's what we're trying to erase right now as we do these sessions.
Thank you for the reminder, Ron. the issue is not to continue to try to separate. The issue is to bring dual kinds of things into together in order to create balance, whatever the duality is.
Barbara,
Yes, ma'am.
good morning. This is Kathy. I wanted to add one thing. I think when we were looking at the lesson on Monday night, and we were looking at when we say Elohim, we were speaking of the characteristics and attributes of who God is. And in that name or the characteristics of who we are, being Elohim, having that human experience, part of that is that we do get to make strict judgment, but the judgments aren't labels. The judgments are making decisions. And in making decisions, that I am one who rules as God, that I'm ruling from a place of loving kindness. And so when I look at you, I should have that same compassion that the Father had when he looks at me. And by that way, and looking at that, I don't see lazy, shiftless, good for nothing, attributes based on your color of your skin. I don't see any of that. I see a human being, and as a result of seeing another human being, I don't assign a label to that human being. So, because as creators, if I am looking at you and I am making a decision about you, then I'm relegating you to be in a position where I am going to treat you according to how I see you. And that is not what it means when it says, as Elohim, I get to make decisions about things. The decisions that I make are the decisions that are supposed to create a situation for all of humanity where we learn to live together as one and be one with one another, because I'm my brother and my brother is me. And I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. The Elohim that we are does not belittle, does not put beneath, but the Elohim that we are points to the oneness of us all. And what are those aspects that reverberate with that oneness? So thank you so much. So you're right. We do make judgments all the time, but those judgments are always tempered with loving kindness, so that we don't overdo something, or we don't get over restricted. And same thing with loving kindness. We can overdo that too. We can love somebody so much that they aren't able to function within themselves, because they're always waiting for or basking in that unbalanced love. So all of this is about the balance. And all of this is functioning from the self, which is that of balance. So thank you. It's 12:33. Anything else today? If not, we'll take up with
Hey,
this
Barbara.
tomorrow. Yes, sir.
Barbara, I got
Yes,
one more
sir.
thing of what George had talked about. He was talking about what fuels that person to
Yes, sir.
do or say whatever thing is on the outside. I don't care what it is. That how you see it. It always fuels the what's that word we were all talking about? The perception. Because anything on the outside fuels the perception. And it's how you let it come in. And when it come in, that's when you get your ego. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand exactly, and that's an excellent point. We let things that we see are things that are external to us, the physical fuel, the perception. So we can do that. You're right.
And
Okay.
that is why
Go ahead, Ron.
yeah, I was just going to say just the scripture that Charles read for you earlier and you commented on, we wrestle not flesh and blood. In other words, not with the things you see. So that's a constant reminder of that. Your physical eyes can get you in trouble or as if you use them to make judgments. So it's from that you don't use that perception to make your judgments on other people.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron.
It's 12:36. I don't know if we know. I do know we have not exhausted this. Let's see where we go. Let's see where it leads us tomorrow, or if anyone has anything new that they want to begin the discussion about and comment about tomorrow, we can go there too. That's the very nature of spiritual things. They can unfold themselves, and so we will let tomorrow unfold itself in terms of the truth that should be revealed. So thank you, everybody. Keep those positive energies going toward humankind in general and toward ourselves.
Thank
See you
you.
guys tomorrow.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Talk to
you.
you
Thank
tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, family.